Good, that's good.
Now would you do the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Terry.
Let's pray. Most gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for loving us, watching over us. I pray you give us wisdom tonight conducting the school's business. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. Everybody is present. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda. First by Dwayne. Second by Janelle. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Special report.
No special reports.
No special reports. Superintendent report.
First, you have your district comparison report. It's good to hear, right in front of your revenue is up, but expenditures are up as well, but not drastic changes either place.
Any questions on that?
Okay, enrollment report, Ms. Warren, can present.
As you can see, I made a little bit of a change there, a little caveat on the very top and highlighted because I realized that after 8:30, we'll still have kids come in and out and drop and add, and when you try and compare it, when you pull that data again like today to try and compare it, it just throws it off and makes it askew. So I just always want to put that in there, like that report was run at 8:30 this morning. But overall, we're up from last month. If you look at last month, we had 2,217. As of today, we had 2,223, so we're up 6 overall. Up 30 over from last year's February board meeting, and up 24 from last end of the year last year, in the last day of school last year. Kindergarten still continues to flourish.
In second grade, all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. Next up.
Next, I want to touch base with y'all on new guidance as far as COVID. Luckily, our COVID numbers are way down. If you'll notice in that section, the last page is where we're at today with COVID numbers. And we have 1 positive student in the district and only 8 in quarantine and 0 staff. It's been a long time since we've seen these numbers.
Right.
Well, you know, if you've had it all year.
Let's not jinx that. But I wanna share with you, Tom, do you wanna argue those numbers? I mean, that's what I pulled.
That sounds about right.
Okay.
It's been really slow.
So I have put together new guidelines, after the state has changed some things. And if you look at the next paper, that is an email from, Ivy Piper at ADE. And that second paragraph I've highlighted, where it says contact tracing and quarantines for students who are determined to be probable close contacts remain best practice as mitigation strategies. But there is no directive for districts to do so. Isolation is still appropriate for individuals who test positive for COVID-19 and those who are symptomatic. So I have met with administrators and put together this guidance and sent it back out to our nurses to get their feedback. And we feel good about these new guidelines. COVID-19 positives, it's the same. But as far as close contacts, if you look at that first line, continue to attend school daily unless symptomatic. They will monitor daily for signs and symptoms. Masking is recommended, and we want them to stay at home if or when symptoms develop and contact our district POC, which is Tom. But I do wanna say, Myself and our admin team feel that we still want to notify parents. If they've had a close contact, I want our families to know. And they may choose to still go ahead and have their child quarantined, but we're not going to mandate it any longer if y'all approve for us to do so. But we do have guidance from AD and we no longer have to, unless they become that. And I spoke with one of the nurses today, and I need to get back with the rest of them, but we will develop a protocol for making sure the parents know. It'll be a phone call, and we'll make a couple attempts to reach out to them and let them know that their child has been in close contact. Not gonna be a paper phone, we will a paper phone form, but we will do our best to make contact to let them know. So, any questions about that?
So the parent still has an option.
Yes.
If they wanna do the 10 days, then they can do the 10 days, they'll be excused, so, or the 5 and return with a mask, however they choose to do it. And the AAA has also changed their return to play protocol for athletes who have tested positive, tested positive. If they, have basically had very few symptoms along with their positive test, they do not have to go through the doctor to get return to play, and they do not have to do the 5-day build-up, you might say, to return back to practice or playing, as long as the parent signs off on it. Now, if they have been extremely ill or have had to hospitalize because of it, then they do have to do that. But that frees up a lot of kids too.
So do y'all have any questions or concerns?
That's great.
You know, it's been so hard quarantining kids, and so many of them never had symptoms, never got sick, so this will give them a way back in school.
Such a hardship for the families too.
Administrators, any concern, anybody wanna add anything to that?
So you need a motion
I would
to
like
adopt the new
I would like
guidance
a
update?
motion to adopt those new guidelines, and then we will get that posted to our website and updated to our ready time plan. And so parents are aware.
And the nurses signed off on this.
It was shared with them in a Google Doc and asked for feedback. And I had them check in to make sure like I had the temperature correct on the return.
Okay, so I need a motion to adopt the new guidance update. First by Terry,
Second.
second by Lenora, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Good deal. Okay. Administration reports.
Let's start in the back with Mr. Kane.
Stand in the back row.
Well, there's a lot going on, but there's not any particular thing going on other than the performance today and stuff, but I just wanna make a shout out to all the teachers and staff in the Huntsville School District, and particularly the teachers and staff at Huntsville Intermediate School. Because we've endured many difficult situations and hardships this school year, and even with all that being said, they've carried on with education. And, you know, some days when we met our limit and, you know, we just think we could carry on anymore, we're like, just love them and make them feel special. So, with that being said, I applaud the teachers of this and staff of the district.
I'd second that. That's good. I wanna brag on our FBLA a little bit. They just got back from their spring district conference. Had several competitors that placed down there, including 2 first place finishers, 5 second place, and 6 third place finishers, so they did a great job. And they're looking forward to stake now in April, so. We had Judy Fields from the co-op come out and do some walkthroughs for our teachers, and she's looking for science of reading, and we got a lot of really good feedback from her. There's some things that we need to work on, but there was also a lot of really good feedback, so happy about that. We've been having some meetings. I've met with teachers, Treacle and I've met with teachers on master scheduling and just some things that we need to look into for next year, and they brought up some really good thoughts, and So we're gonna go back to the drawing board and see what we can do to make it happen. We wanna make it as good as we can for our kids, so. And then also, we talked, I believe last month about, looking into some new curriculum, so we're still working on that for, most of our core subjects. We adopted a new curriculum for our literacy, but all the other core subjects, we're still looking for new curriculum, so. Working on all that right now.
Ditto for these two.
We've got Judy Fields coming Wednesday of this week to the high school, so she's going to go around and do basically the same thing that she did at the middle school. We're training teachers to look at kids' schedules, or their transcripts to determine what they need to take from here on out. So we've been working on that. I also want to say that got a lot of job openings at the high school this year, and it's not because I'm running them off or Zach's running them off, they're retiring. So there are a lot of postings there. We're gonna start interviewing for them. I'm excited because there are a lot of applications coming in, so that's really thrilling for me. Also, I'm finishing up master schedule, or we're finishing up the master schedule, so that's just about done, which is a huge task in itself because there's a lot of little moving parts in a high school schedule. And I want to brag on our student section at athletic events because I get compliments on them all the time, and I'm just going to throw that out there for kicks and grins. But people know our kids behave, and they're appreciative of that. So when we go other places and see kids not behaving, it's kind of like when your kid goes to the store and it's the way our kids are behaving, or acting. So I'm proud of how they behave at the games. So throwing that out there. That's about all I've got. Happy Valentine's Day. Just did it. Who did this? Who scheduled this?
The only thing I've got to add to that is, we've already had a lot of catching up to do with the COVID surge we had back in January, so we're strategically doing stuff throughout store time and other times to get kids caught up, and then you add all the snow and ice, we're already, catching up now with that, and there's a lot of good things being done. I'll echo what Mike was saying down there with our teachers working with kids. We got math and intervention help being planned throughout the week. We've got going to college, helping kids get better scores, hopefully on their ACT stuff. There's a lot of good things going on right now to work on that. The other thing I was gonna say, if y'all saw on social media, something new to Huntsville, sort of from my second year, kept seeing this stuff about the dinosaurs were stolen, and I didn't know what that was. If y'all look on social media, a lot of our CTE kids worked very, very hard with the folks in that building to get those made up again and returned to those people and put back. I think they're already decorated for Valentine's. I think they got hearts on them and stuff. So it was a really cool thing those kids welded and pieced together back pretty close to what they had before and put it back in their yard. So being new, I didn't know what they were talking about. I thought they meant the big green one that was up there, up the road, and then I found out what they were talking about. So I thought that was a really cool thing those kids got together and did. So if y'all get a chance, check that out because it shows kind of the giving nature and something they didn't have to do, but they wanted to do to give back. So check that out if you get a chance. That's all I got.
Good evening. Just pretty much like what they said. Not only do I want to shout out to our staff down at St. Paul, but also to Harry and Steve sitting here. Brian's out and been out a while, and Harry and Steve both reach out to me to make sure that we're covered down there and, what do we need, they'll take care of. So I wanted to just let those guys know, really appreciate that. They make sure we're taken very well care of. We had Valentine's parties today. That was awesome. A lot of little kids running around, having a great time on the sugar high. That was wonderful. Miss Chappell's been down, training us on ACT work keys and the process of training our teachers for the ACT test itself. Teachers of doing a new literacy in the elementary. And so to go along with that, we just implemented the Lexia Learning Core 5 and Power Up to go along with it. And so there's been lots of things. Miss Meredith Nardone from the co-op has come over and working with us, and she's coming back next Monday for a follow-up. And kind of like Matt said, she's giving us some ideas on how we can improve and And that's been really well. Before I forget, I do want to say that our senior girls won the conference Saturday. The regular season, it came down to the final game against County Line, and it was a big game Saturday, and they pulled it out. So they are our conference champions, and they'll be the #1 seed in the district tournament this week. Big shout out for that.
Well, diesel keeps climbing and the weather won't cooperate, but we're doing all right.
Harry, you're missing something.
Yeah.
What, you're missing something, Harry.
Missing something?
Yeah, your beard.
Yeah, the mustache would drive me nuts.
I looked out there, I didn't.
Yeah, my hair is a little crazy right now.
At least you have it.
Well.
It's in disguise.
But we did get two of our new buses came in on Friday. Big thanks to Tasha again for helping with the funding on that. The inspector will be here Wednesday and we can turn them loose. They're great. We got air conditioning, big old luggage type rack in the back for band instruments or cheer stuff, whatever you can put back there. And these are the ones that anybody can drive. So some teachers have already hit me up. They're ready. Good.
Awesome.
Shout out to the maintenance guys, especially Michael. I want to give him credit. He came in on Sunday before we come back to school, and he and I shoveled lots of snow because we didn't know if we were going to have school or not on Monday. But he's always willing to come in and help, and I appreciate that. I appreciate him. We've been running short. Today's the first day that we've had a full crew back, and it was pretty tough. Pretty tough. You gotta put your blue jeans on and your work boots and you go do what you need to do just to keep everything running. So, custodians, still have 2 openings. Gonna do interviews later this week. I've got 4 applicants. So, excited about that. It's been a while since I've had any applicants. But we are running short on the custodial end of it, but everybody's been pitching in and working double shifts, trading off with each other, so, they do a fantastic job. I know it's not my deal, but I want to give a shout out to Mr. Rinker, our shop teacher in the CTE building. He has been a godsend to our staff, our fellow employees. If you have a problem with your vehicle, all you gotta do is call him. And he will find a way to get it in. And he has got some of the sharpest young men and women working in that shop. And I don't care if it's diesel, gasoline, whatever, they can fix it. And personally, they saved me over $4,000 working on my transmission. And I appreciate them. And things are running fantastic, like it's brand new. So I'll give a shout out to Mr. Wrinkle and his crew.
That's great news. That's what we're hoping for sure.
Right, well, we've, Bruce mentioned St. Paul girls won the conference down there, we're proud of them. Our senior boys and girls up here finished second, both girls and boys on their side and start conference play or district play Wednesday. Both of them play at Pea Ridge this year is where it's at. They need to win one to be able to advance on to regionals, so hopefully they'll be able to do that. So we've had great years for both of them. We've got baseball, softball, soccer, and track all going right now, getting ready to start. They'll start right around the 1st of March, one of those games and events. So looking forward to those getting started and some better weather. But also glad to hear that Zero Crawford got the roof on the new arena over there. It's dried in, that part of it is anyway. So we'll be able to start moving inside and doing some work in there. So looking forward to that.
Technology, we're just trucking along. We are, to follow up on Tom, we are actually in the process of starting wiring and everything in the new activity center, hopefully next week. So that's gonna be exciting to get in there and get that started, and it's awesome that we have a crew that we can do a lot of that in-house ourselves to save a lot of money. So I'm really proud of those guys. We're just trucking along, getting ready. We're already planning for possibly our summer projects. It's weird to think that we're already looking at summer, but as many lead times as there are in things, that's where we need to be thinking about what I need to do in summer now, so. But that's all I have.
gonna be a big undertaking, ain't it?
I'm sorry.
It's gonna be a big undertaking.
Yes, yes.
So Bailey, you guys are actually doing some of the physical wiring?
Oh, yes. I mean, we do most of, like, all of our access control and everything, we do in-house already. Unless it's a mass, a mass project.
They didn't budget for that, for them doing it, did they?
No.
No,
No, that was up front originally.
and that was at my request, because I'm able to use, E-rate money to pay for a company to come in and do like the data cabling and stuff. And there's like 300 something drops in that building, but we're only paying 20% of that because we're able to use, E-rate money for that. But then like, our own tech department, they're doing all the access control and all the cabling for that.
Well, I was just thinking if C.R. Crawford was had already put that in there.
No,
We had to
No.
revisit
no,
it.
yeah, no, that was
It
at.
was one of
my
those bullets on the, below the
Yeah,
line.
it's in there.
Yeah, no, that was something I know that we could save money on by using E-rate funds for, so,
Good try.
Thank you, Bailey.
no problem.
Pre-K application is coming up. The ABC grant that'll be next on the horizon. The Civil Rights Data Collection Report, which is one that it seems to be threatening every time you log on to it. It's about 99.95% done, just have to correct some errors and waiting for one little piece of data, but it still have until March for that one to be finished. Facilities plan was submitted, and then partnership funding is due on March 1st, and we'll get that one done as well.
Shout out to Jonathan, he asked if he could come in at 3:00 in the morning so that he could get some of the civil rights data uploaded into the system box. And so we did alter his hours that day, so he could come in at 3:00
Grateful that
in the morning.
I could flip it, so. It was well worth it, like it was like looking at a website instead of watching something spin
Yeah.
the entire time, so.
3 a.m.
Thank you for that.
No, thank you all, I mean, it helped greatly.
You was thinking about us when you was here.
Okay, well, just to tack on to what Jonathan was saying about pre-K grant, we did find out today that our funds that are always not gonna come back the next year, our Endeavor grant, will be renewed. So we will have 60 slots here at the Huntsville
That's
campus.
good. And that is big news for our community, that's 2 classrooms.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
20 slots, so it's one full classroom that we wouldn't be able to fund otherwise. And so we did find out that because of COVID, the folks that run the Endeavor grant are still gonna fund those 20 slots for next year. So we're excited to maintain our 3 classrooms for next year. Just found that out today, so I don't know if Jonathan even knew that yet. ALE, our 3-year rotation cycle to renew our ALE program, is up, and so that program description is due March 1st, and so, been working on that to get that ready. Like Mike said, Valentine parties today, so we all kind of have a contact sugar high, I think, today. And I just would be remiss if I didn't add on the ditto to Mike's comment, because last year was hard because we were facing a lot of brand new stuff, but this year for primary was harder. It didn't really affect our kids as much last year, and as we know, this year it did, and just navigated so many really difficult situations. And so I have to also shout out to the staff that step up every single day, no matter, I mean, it's just where do we need to be today, who do we need to take care of, and they do so without complaint. So we're just so fortunate to have so many great folks working here in our district.
And Jennifer, something I failed to mention earlier, and I wanna go back and touch on this
The
when we were
pre-K
talking about the
guidelines.
COVID, yes. Pre-K guidelines.
So, as y'all know, pre-K kind of runs under 3 different entities that control that. You have the Department of Health and Human Services that are the minimum licensing folks. You have the ABC people at DESE that kind of have their say in things, who typically follow whatever DESE's saying, and then the school district. And so, the only difference is really the 4-year-olds, they do have to, there's no masking, you have to, stay out the 10 days for children 4 and under, but otherwise it's pretty much the same.
Yeah, this guidelines apply to 5 years and up is what that's
Yes.
for. They don't recommend 4-year-olds wearing masks. That return after the 5th day.
No, it's not conducive.
Yeah, they won't keep them on, but 2, it's just not, cleanliness where, yeah, it's not very sanitary.
I just have to just say how thankful I am being in the building that has the youngest kids when they changed it to the 5 days with a mask and trying to keep a 5-year-old in a mask and who's monitoring that. That was very difficult. So I'm very thankful and happy that we get to keep kids at school. I know Tanya McCone is happy. I quarantined her granddaughter.
We always contact the parent on those, I mean, always have on whether they could wear a mask or not, and if they don't feel like they could stay home 10
Right,
days.
yes.
So, for the 5-year-olds and up. But if they thought they could, then they were allowed to come, and if they couldn't keep the mask on, then they went back home, so. Most of the parents worked well with us on it.
Yes, very.
And at the bottom of that guidance, it does say pre-K guidelines will still follow DHS regulations, but I wanted to explain that a little bit. And when you said pre-K, I thought,
Yeah.
we did talk about that.
Audra, when we try to contact them by phone, do we leave a message if they don't answer?
Yes, what I talked, and the only nurse that I've had a conversation about was Miss Nurse Haven at middle school, and this conversation just took place today. And she had asked about just sending a note home, and this was an email conversation. And I don't feel good about that. I said, we need to make contact, but oftentimes parents' phone numbers are changed and it's hard. So I told her I felt like a message was fine as long as we left a message and make at least a couple of attempts to contact.
Well, we are working on making revisions to the district literacy support plan. We have a meeting with the State Department this week to just kind of give them our progress so far, the things we've been working on, textbook adoption and things like that. Working on a lot of special education testing. It's the referral season. Everybody's trying to get those in after report cards, so a lot of that coming through. And then continually just working with ESSER, trying to determine, what's gonna be the best use for our funding, what we have remaining, and just ever-changing regulations, so trying to keep up with that.
Well, in the special ed world, we have had a month of monitoring from the Department of Ed, and it happens every 3 years, and the deadline is today, so as soon as I get in there and push that submit button, we'll be good to go on that. That's been a hard process for our special ed teachers because we've had 2 weeks of interruptions with snow and COVID, and they're trying to be compliant. It's been a hard 2 years for them as well as everybody else. It's hard to do therapy online and that kind of stuff and keep our paperwork in compliance. So we've done lots and lots of work and meetings and corrections and revisions the last few days. Pre-K, we have a pre-K transition for any students that are getting special services in pre-K from ERC or from the co-op. And we have about 25 conferences next week for some of those kiddos to see how we can help them. And then I just also wanted to brag on the unified students at the high school. They had a busy week last week. On one day they hosted the Polk Street Polar Plunge over here again and raised some money for the unified sports program. And I think Todd Thomas was the top copsicle raising money. It was cold that morning too. And then Tucker Bradley had a nice costume on him. Is that gonna be in the paper maybe this week? He had a good costume. He raised he raised quite a bit of money, $700 I think, but.
No, it's over.
It's over $1,000.
Oh, was it? Great, okay, well, maybe Todd was 700. And then the next day, the partners took their partners to the Jones Center for competition for unified floor hockey, and then they had a basketball day, and they lost by 1 point, getting to go to state in Hot Springs. I know. So Lincoln emptied them out, but kudos to those kids and partners, cause that's a fun, great opportunity for all of them.
How many special ed teachers do we have in the district?
19, I believe, and about 5 or 6 therapists.
Thanks, John.
Thank you guys. Okay, next is transfer request. I need a motion to approve the transfer. Oh, I'm so sorry. Skipped ahead. I apologize. New business.
Okay, first we have, this is a yearly thing from Beardsley, and it is our proposed budget and expenditures resolution. And it also has the election documents that we send the paper every year, and the suggested motion is in there. The motion reads to adopt the attached proposed budget and expenditures with tax levy for fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2023 to and including June 30th, 2024, and to approve all related election documents. I just need a motion to approve this before I can send it on to the paper.
Make a motion. First by Kevin,
Second.
second by Lenore, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried.
Next, we have our monthly transfer of millage money. In the amount of $468,728.95.
Wait a moment.
Make a motion.
First by Lenore, second by Terry, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried.
Okay. Next, I wanna put this before you for discussion and look at. The purchase of a compact track loader, which I've always heard that called a skid steer. With the maintenance building, we have a lot of deliveries in large amounts, and I think we do need something to unload things out there. The maintenance guys and the guys and boys from CTE come over and help at times. But I could see where a skid steer would be more versatile. And there's 3 bids before you, Steve has sent out, and he'll have to answer a lot of these questions as far as specifics if you have any. But the selected bid is the first one. This would allow us to spread our own mulch, do minor dirt work, and also unload commodities and shipments that come in.
It would have a pallet fork attachment
Do we have a lot of pallets for like supplies and stuff that come in? Or-
every week.
Okay,
And right now,
so
unless
you're having
they,
to unload them?
unless they bring a Tommy Gate
Yeah.
truck, we have to unload a piece at a time.
And then a Bailey with
I can attest to the technology piece, everything we get is on multiple pallets.
And he's paid more to,
We do our best to try to schedule the lift gate, but it's an extra charge every shipment.
Sure.
You had to drive a skid steer.
I do not, but I'm willing to learn and more than
Get insurance for Bailey. On that New Holland, that's not a high flow, right?
Yes, it is a high flow, I believe.
I didn't say that.
What's the warranty on the New Holland?
The warranty is 3 years, parts and labor. It's basically the same on all of them, all 3 of the bids that we had. The reason New Holland's is a little cheaper, New Holland has a program nationwide for schools. And I did not know that until I started looking into this, and that's why they're considerably cheaper than the next closest bid.
So you got, the New Holland is a 74 horse machine.
Yes,
Okay, the Cat is a 67 horse,
that's correct.
and then you got, what is that, 62 horse on the Kubota?
The Kubota, yes.
Kubota's high flow.
High flow, hydraulic, yes, quick attach. And I believe,
Are they all rated for net or gross though? Sometimes they switch it up.
on New Holland, since that was the lowest bid, I've done some extra questions, and it's 3,970 pound lifting capacity, for that machine. And it'll lift, about 13 feet in the air. So, we've had to rent machines, we've had to beg to the city, to come and help, bring their machines at times, and they can't always do that. And this would alleviate a lot of problems that we have, not only unloading things, but we could also do a lot of our own dirt work, a lot of our own parking lot leveling, and stuff that we haven't never done. Anytime you have somebody come bring a load of dirt, and the minimum charge is $300 to spread that dirt. So that's something we can do in-house. And it's just, all around, it's just gonna help, it's gonna help everybody. I mean, we got a trailer we can haul it on, we can take it to St. Paul if they need it, so we got a truck to pull it with. We're equipped for it, so.
How much does it weigh, the New Holland?
The new haul, how much does it weigh? I don't know if that was on my sheet.
7,000 something, I would assume.
Yeah, don't know. You know, I did not ask that question, Kyle, I'm sorry. How much it
What kind
weighs.
of trailer do you have to pull it? How heavy
We have
axles
a,
on
we have
the
a
trailer?
16 with 16-foot double axle trailer, 3,500 pound axles.
It's 6,000.
That's only 7,000 pounds, right?
Right.
That's not big enough.
I mean, we haul, that's all we've been, that's all we've had since I've been here.
I'm not gonna loan you my trailer if you need to buy it. I'm not opposed to it, but I'd like some more, I'd like to get some more details about some of the other ones. I don't think just because it's, they have that deal, that doesn't necessarily one we're to get.
I mean, yes, I mean, I was just under the impression that we were gonna try to get the cheapest bid that we could. They're all similar size, this, especially the Kubota, that's the smallest one that they have. On theirs, the Cat, you know, Cat's a nice machine. I haven't run a New Holland, but I've run Kubotas and I've run Cats before. I'm not knocking either one of them, but whenever I worked for a utility company for all those years, we always used Cat. And they stood behind and their parts were easily attainable at a short amount of time, so. Be glad to get whatever information you want. Mr. Forsyth would be glad to call us back and.
Well, I just wanna make sure we're comparing apples to apples and not just
Right,
the dollar.
I mean, the horsepowers is, and that's what when we got the bids, we wanted the horsepowers to be as similar as close as possible. So,
All three of them, are they all three vertical lift or radius lift?
I don't,
Well, vertical will lift this way,
right,
and then the radius lifts this way.
my understanding, they're vertical. And all three of them have the quick attach, all three of them have the pilot, what they call the pilot controls, the joystick controls, where you're not having to use your feet all the time. And we specifically asked for tracks instead of tires, because the tracks are so much more stable when you're loading and unloading things.
Well, on the piece of paper here, it doesn't say the New Holland is a high flow, so that's why
Okay,
do you have some other information that says it is?
no, sir, all I've got is just a little sheet that I printed off, and it does not say that.
Because the Kubota is, and I know that's more expensive too, so.
Right, yeah.
And I'll be honest, I don't feel comfortable spending any more money than the amount came back for the lower bid.
Well, like on the high flow, I do know on the high flow, like the Kubota's got here on the high flow. Any attachments that you buy for that machine has gotta be high flow, otherwise it won't work. It just won't work with the standard flow, so what you're gonna want is a standard flow machine, regardless of what you go with, it's gonna need to be a standard flow machine in order to fit all the attachments unless you got high flow equipment, because high flow is always gonna be higher, stump grinders, et cetera, asphalt machines use the high flow, and we don't need either one of those, so.
No, and it is my understanding that all of those attachments are rentable, that you can rent them. And
My understanding also.
no more than we would need. The bucket and the pallet forks is what we were concerned with.
Okay, what does the board feel?
I'd like to wait till we get our other construction job done personally,
Talking about the,
get the activity center.
okay,
I don't think it's gonna make a difference, just for the fact that, I mean, it's.
well, it's not coming out of the same fund, so it won't matter,
Yeah.
but I agree. Anybody else?
In the Kubota, they may get a better price if they don't have to have high flow, because I know they're more expensive.
I don't think $20,000, but I'm not an
It was
equipment,
10. It was only 10, wasn't it?
20.
Was it 10?
Yeah.
Thing is, if it's, something we need and we're gonna do it, you gotta
second prices and waiting a couple months,
Who knows?
any of them
Yeah.
could increase more than
Anything's gonna
$1,000
increase.
because they're not available, so.
Right.
Here's another thing to consider, we could back up and just do a forklift. And last summer when we had original conversations about budgeting to do something like this, that's originally what we were discussing. But I understand the versatility of this does give us more options, so I understand that it does cost more money.
So Lenora, we'd have to take off the tax and everything on that Kubota bid, if you wanna compare them, because this one doesn't have tax on it.
The back,
The next
the
page
the next page does,
Second
page nine.
55.
Dan,
Man, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm willing to take a vote on what y'all wanna do. Make a motion, somebody needs to make a
I'll
motion.
make a motion, we buy the New Holland.
Okay, I've got a motion to buy the New Holland from Kevin. Second from Janelle. All in favor?
I.
Opposed?
Nay.
Mr. Terry, Kyle, are opposed? Motion carried. Okay. Next up, I'm sorry, now we're, sorry.
And I need to say, on the public agenda, it says none, and that's incorrect. We added some student transfers, that there are some student transfers. I failed to catch that.
I need a motion to approve the transfer. First by Neil, second by Kyle, all in favor? Motion carried. All right. Now. So sorry.
Nothing
We're going to go to executive session very briefly. Discuss personnel on hires and renewals, and we will be right back.
Yeah, this list says January.
Good.
But, oh, yeah,
No action taken. I do need to let you know that Mr. Glenn had to leave due to medical reasons. So he won't be back for the rest of the meeting. And we're just checking to make sure.
Make sure you made it home.
Make sure you made it home. Anyway, back from executive session, no action taken.
Danny, I'd like to make a motion that we extend Ms. Kimball's contract 1 year. I'm not sure that date when it's gonna.
25.
25, June 25?
Yes, sir. I second that.
Okay, so I have a motion to extend by 1 year Mrs. Audrey Kimball's contract to June, I think it's 30, June 30 of 2025. Is that correct?
She'll know.
And a second by Kevin. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Okay. Need a motion to approve the personnel resignations, hires, transfers, and renewals.
I'll make that motion.
First by Terry,
Second.
second by Kyle. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Ms. Kimball.
Okay, resignation, certified, Jarek Hutchinson, that's our ag teacher that passed away, effective January 9th, 2022. Kimberly Bollinger, health, family and consumer science teacher, June 30th, 2022, retirement. Tyler Twerves, Huntsville High School history teacher, June 30th, 2022, retirement. Shannon Twerves, Huntsville High School special education teacher, June 30th of 2022, retirement. Otika Baker, Watson Primary School classroom teacher, June 30th, 2022, retirement. Eric Miller, St. Paul instructional facilitator, June 30th, 2022, retirement. Kelly Yarbrough, Huntsville High School math teacher, June 30th, 2022, retirement. And Peyton Reynolds, St. Paul High School history teacher, June 30th, 2022. Classified, Lance Griffith, Watson Primary School custodian, effective January 14th. Donna Grimes, bus driver, January 4th, and Teresa Farrell, bus driver, January 14th. Hires, certified, all administrators and directors, and names are attached. Denise Trotter, Huntsville High School ag teacher, effective January 20th. Classified, Cammie Wade, Huntsville High School special education paraprofessional, effective February 15th. April McCullough, Watson Primary School food service, effective February 15th. Lindsay Duncan, middle school custodian, February 15th. Transfers, Cole Harriman, Huntsville High School East teacher to Huntsville High School health teacher, effective July 1st, 2022.
Thank you. Is there any other board comments, questions, and or discussion items?
That's a pretty high achieving list that we had on those retirements, and I want to thank those folks for their service to our district for many, many years. Lots of good names on that list.
I don't think they would mind me telling this, but the Twerveses are going to teach in Alaska for 2 or 3 years.
Oh,
Wow.
that's so much fun. I love them.
Wow.
It's kind of neat.
It'd be nice to know how many years of teaching experience on the ones that
I
are
was on this
retiring
list, yeah.
together.
I know that Mr. DeRose is my 5th grade teacher, 9th grade.
Wow, that long ago.
Well, I was in college and I had to kind of teach an economics lesson, and I got to come to Huntsville Intermediate, and he was the teacher that I got to go to his classroom, and Mr. Kane was the principal that directed me to Mr. Jordan.
That was a wagon, wasn't it?
We actually did do the what was the Oregon Trail? That was our computer class.
I do think it was still the 1990s, I will say that.
Well, as Janelle said, absolutely, we do appreciate all of those teachers that are retiring, and we hate to lose them. But we are very thankful that we had them, and we appreciate all the years of experience that they brought to our school district, and they're gonna be sorely missed. So we do wish them the best in retirement.
Well, and I'm grateful for Miss Trotter. She's a retired ag teacher from Elkins who's come over to be along or to take over for our lost Hutch, and she's a gem.
I'll agree with that. She's taken up really well with the kids.
Yeah, the kids love her.
And
Yeah,
she's
I
good
love her.
for Miss Jackson. She's helping, Miss Jackson lost her mentor too, so Miss Trotter stepped in to fill that spot.
That's very helpful.
And I was really grateful that she was willing to do that, come out of retirement to teach our kids first.
She's amazing.
Very good. Well, we appreciate, as always, we appreciate every one of you guys and what y'all do for our kids and for our district. So we thank you for that, and we appreciate y'all very much.
Made the motion to adjourn.
I got a motion adjourned by Kyle, second by Kevin. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.
is admirable. You work endless hours on behalf of the students here in this district and don't always get the kudos that you deserve for that work. I appreciate you, and I know everybody in the community does. And there are days. We are here. This training is a specific requirement of an order as part of a case that was brought, Reitzel versus Huntsville School District. It was heard in Washington County. It's not over yet. Court made some preliminary findings, and in fact, we were put in the position to have admitted a couple of violations of the FOI. The court's order entered December 15, said this training was to happen within 60 days. 60 days was yesterday. Under the law, today is within the period the court requires. So we're here, and I'm going to take the blame for the fact that we pulled this together today because we recognize that, in fact, today would be the last day. Although I think the court would have been fine with us having planned a seminar for you, some training for you, but here we are. And I'm going to make this as informative as possible. I want you to interrupt me and ask questions along the way if you have some. This is really for your benefit, not mine, in the sense that I want to make sure you're hearing what you need to hear and hear what you want to hear in terms of what the law says and how the FOI impacts your work on this board. I think the important statement in the statute is on that first page, and I'm just going to read it out loud because I think this is being recorded and it may be viewed by some people. It's vital in a democratic society that public business be performed in an open and public manner so that the electors shall be advised of the performance of public officials and of decisions that are reached in public activity and in making public policy. Toward this end, this chapter is adopted, making it possible for them or their representatives to learn and to report fully the activities of their public officials. I think we all believe in the sunshine that's necessary to good government. We want to see government be transparent. We want to see government be understood. Those who are patrons of a particular entity need to know that their government is responsive to what the needs of that community or that particular set of patrons is. This act has two major components to it. It's the open meetings provision and the open records provision. And so we're going to talk in detail about both of those, and I'm going to take you through a few of the terms of the statute. The custodian doesn't really affect you all except to the extent that you're asked from time to time in a records request for certain messages, maybe text or emails. In that context, you are the custodian of those records. If it had to do with school business and the request is made, then you are the custodian and you have an obligation under this law to make those things available if requested, unless they are otherwise exempt. And we'll talk about some exemptions along the way here. The first part of this statute is 103 is talking in terms of some definitions, some basic definitions. The next one I wanted to emphasize is the public meeting definition, which is found at the bottom of page 2. And certainly a school board is included in the list of entities in the state of Arkansas that are required to have public meetings. And we're going to talk about some exceptions, specifically under the executive session, when your meeting can be something other than public. The public records, I think the phrases that are important in that definition, at the bottom of the page, those are records that are required by law to be kept or otherwise kept. There are times when you have materials that are presented to you, you're not the custodian, you're not the archivist of those records. A budget, for example. That's not your role as a board member to necessarily keep a file of all of those transactions leading up to the adoption of a budget. The fact that you have it, if somebody asks you for it, then you become responsible for turning it over. That may not be a very good example, but what I mean by that is if you have kept a record and you weren't necessarily required to, at the point in time if you're asked for it, you have to turn it over. Contrariwise, if you weren't required to keep it and you got rid of it, there's nothing wrong with that. What you don't want to be in the situation of doing is getting rid of records after somebody makes a request for them. And that's something you want to be very, very vigilant about. If you have a practice of deleting your emails, for example, after a certain number of days or upon reading them or a year from now, that's okay. There's nothing that says in the law you have to keep messages that deal with school business on your computer or on your phone. But if you are asked for them and you haven't deleted them, at that point you do have to produce them if they fit within the request. Does that make sense? And then the definition for records is very, very broad. Computer-based information, electronic data compilations, that's the kind of thing that is going to be what you may deal with as board members. You may have communications that you receive electronically. Those are things, if they deal with school business, could be considered a public record if they're in your possession at the time somebody asks for them. And there's a presumption that if they were kept by public employees within the scope of their employment, then they are a public record. And records maintained by public offices. As a public, you're not an employee of the district, but you're a public official. And so I think that that definition still fits you as a board. Section 104 talks about what can happen if there's a violation of the FOI. I think it's important to note that there aren't very many cases noted. That's not a very often enforced provision in the statute. That doesn't mean it's not important. I'm just telling you it's not something that happens very often, that a prosecutor takes the unusual step of challenging somebody criminally because they have violated negligently a provision of this act.
Negligently means that you didn't mean to.
I'm sorry?
You did mean to.
Yeah.
Negligent would be inadvertence, just an oversight. There's no intention behind it.
Right, that's what I was
Yeah, yeah.
But you're still guilty because it's negligent.
Well, willfulness would not, willfulness could encompass negligence, but there's some other statutes that might come into play under that, but it's not within the FOI, okay? 105 is probably the most reviewed and the most referenced of all of the statutes of the FOI. It starts on the bottom of page 3 and continues over a couple of different pages here. And we start with the premise that if it's a public record, it's open for inspection. And any citizen of the state of Arkansas can make a request for such records. Well, we've turned down requests from people from out of state who send us these random requests for, it might be a set of data about our employees or about certain programs. There's a real question whether that statute can withstand constitutional scrutiny to deny a non-citizen of Arkansas those records. But we've been able to do it because the statute says we can, and we do. Because there is a burden, of course, to producing that kind of data compilation. And so if we don't have to do it, we're not going to do it. That doesn't mean we're not responsive to the constituents in this community. It does mean we don't have to answer to somebody in New York or Texas. So the records can be asked for during regular business hours. A person, you can see in the middle of the page there, a citizen can make a request to a custodian to inspect or copy, and it includes all kinds of things, including photography, video, digital recording, and copies. That request can be made just about any way. They can show up in person, they can do it over the phone, it's encouraged to do it in writing just because then there's less chance of a misunderstanding about what somebody's asking for. And most of the people that make requests are pretty good about putting it in writing to us. And that's extremely helpful because then we know when it was received and we know how quickly we can turn that around and we know the scope of what's being asked. And if it's not clear, we can make an inquiry and seek clarification. You know, Part C there under 2C, it's got to be specific enough to enable the custodian to locate the records. A lot of times we get kind of dragnet requests where we want all of the emails between everybody from the beginning of time. Well, if we can make that more temporally restricted, then it's going to be something that can be handled. Otherwise, it's going to take a long, long time to compile such a request. The person who's making a request doesn't have to tell you why they're making a request. It's not pertinent to the inquiry. Are they a citizen of Arkansas? Then they're entitled to ask.
Could you ask to see their identification to make sure they are?
I have asked for a driver's license if it's apparent from the email or the letter. I had a specific situation where somebody from Florida was compiling some stuff, and I just responded back on behalf of my school district to say, it doesn't appear that you're from Arkansas. So unless you produce an Arkansas identification, we're not going to respond to your request. Well, they had somebody in their organization who had it, and then we had to respond to it. We start then in Part B on the last part of page 4 with the exceptions to the open records provisions of our FOI. And I have purposely left some things in small type because they're not really germane to your particular interest. But number 2 is a really important one, and it's come up recently. It's come up a lot in the last several years. The federal law, of course, has to give way to, the state law has to give way to the federal law, and the federal law has a provision that protects education records. And so when we talk about the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act of 1974, it's been on the books since then, really hasn't been changed since then. We generally refer to it as FERPA. The acronym is the easy way to talk about it. And that federal law is something that you all need to be aware of and have the understanding that if there's a record that the school district has about a student, under the regulations and the statute, that's an educational record. Somebody asking for that educational record, and that could be a video, that could be something in writing, could be their transcript. You're just not going to be in a position to give that to a requesting party under FOI. Now, FERPA says, and you would expect this to be true, that a person in parental relationship with that student, guardian, parent, they're entitled to the record. If the student is now over 18, it's the student that gets to decide whether the record can be released, okay? But when we get an FOI request, oftentimes that's what we're first looking at, is to make sure we don't violate FERPA. We don't want to turn loose of records that cannot be turned over. We have this federal lawsuit pending. You may undoubtedly have heard about it, may have read about it in the paper. One of the things that we had to do in that case, in order to pursue that lawsuit and defend it on your behalf, we had to get an order from the court to allow us to even turn over the records to the plaintiff and plaintiff's counsel. And the court, recognizing the very sensitive nature of those kinds of records, has said that's for attorney's eyes only. And that's where, on your behalf, we made sure we went the extra mile. We weren't just turning it over because it's part of a federal lawsuit. We had to get the court to order us to turn it over. And we knew he would, and the judge would have to do that, and we needed it to pursue the case and present the court what facts are going to be needed to be presented And that case is set for trial in February of next year, by the way. But we'll have some intervening things that will come along in that case. But I wanted you to understand FERPA and make sure you saw the interplay between the two statutes. Another area of great inquiry and often subject of discussion that my office gets involved in has to do with personnel records. We're now talking about your employees. If you look on the middle of page 5, number 12, personnel records in and of themselves can be disclosed. What can't be disclosed is something that would be a clearly unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. So if you have someone who has, maybe there's been an issue and maybe they've had a need for psychiatric help. Let's just use that example. And I'm not saying that's an example that's real world right now. But the fact that that person may have gone on leave for that particular reason, a requester can't get information about that. That's just an invasion of privacy. Now, and can a requester find out if somebody's on leave of absence? Yeah, they can find that out. Can they find out information about your employees' identities? Those things that we now know can be used to steal someone's identity? No, it used to be it wasn't so concerning, but now we don't give out date of birth, we don't give out social security numbers, we don't give out driver's license numbers. All of those things will be redacted, that is, obliterated so that the requester can't see it. If they're entitled to the rest of the record, that's what we're obligated to do. Sometimes we can't separate enough to make the record something we can, in good conscience, release under the Act. So this invasion of personal privacy has been litigated quite a bit. And you see in 13 that non-elected school employees have some additional protection. You don't get your mobile phone numbers, your home phone numbers, email addresses, home addresses of those folks. And we've had people ask for those in mass. They want to have all of that information for all your teachers, for example. Not yours necessarily, but other districts I've represented. Well, we're not giving that up. I'm going to jump over now to page 8. You're welcome to read the rest of that, but it doesn't necessarily bear much on your business. Another area of great inquiry, I would say, numerous inquiries, has to do with evaluation and job performance records. It's always a matter of public interest if somebody has been terminated. Well, depending on how that came down, a resignation in and of itself is not something we can protect or need to protect under the strictures of FOI. But if somebody resigned in the face of a recommendation of termination, then this section comes into play, because at the conclusion of an evaluation, if there was some corrective action taken because of it, and once that action is complete, then a requester would be entitled to that information. On the other hand, if it's just a routine evaluation of an employee, even if it's a negative one, and no employment action resulted from it, that record can't be disclosed. So the person whose record it is obviously has rights to it. But then we get into a situation where maybe the request is made. I had a case not too long ago where we had a teacher who was recommended for termination. We went through a board hearing. I presented a pretty compelling case why that person should be terminated. And at the conclusion of our case, the teacher and the teacher's lawyer wanted to resign rather than put on a case in defense of the allegations. Well, the press had not been privy to the hearing. The teacher had asked for it to be private, which is was the right of that teacher. But the next morning, the press, of course, were entitled to ask for, and did ask for, what the hearing was about and the information that was exchanged in that process. Well, to make the long story short, I had an obligation to tell the attorney for this teacher that I felt that under the FOI, that the record should be turned over. That attorney didn't agree with my opinion, and as was his right on behalf of his client, he could take that to the Attorney General. And so you see in this statute where there's provision for the Attorney General to make a ruling on those particular issues, very narrow, what the Attorney General's role is in this context. And in my case, the Attorney General sided with my opinion and agreed that because the resignation came in conclusion of a threat of termination, that all of those records then were subject to being disclosed, and they didn't seek a review by the court, and of course we disclosed those records. Under that whole statutory regimen, I had to contact the person, and I've had to do that for others who weren't represented by attorneys, and try to do that within 24 days, get their decision about whether they're okay with the records being released or not. And then telling them if they don't agree with me, I think it's going to be something I need to release, then they can get the Attorney General in to give an opinion. And the Attorney General is supposed to do that within 3 working days. That doesn't always happen that way, but they try, and most of the time it does. If you move on down to bottom half of page 9, it talks about the logistics of making records available, and it surprises some boards that we can't just make up a schedule and say we're going to charge 25 cents a copy for pages of records that we copy for somebody. Maybe that's what we charge the public in other settings, but nevertheless, you're limited to the actual cost of reproducing whatever copies are sought, or if it's more sophisticated than just paper copies, you're entitled to recover the cost of that.
Labor?
Pardon?
Labor.
No.
Use of materials.
And that's where it's sometimes a real burden, especially with a small city or a small organization, when there's a very extensive request made going back months and years. But no, you're not entitled to seek to recover the labor. I'm going to talk to you about this new statute that just got adopted in the last legislative session. It doesn't really directly apply to you all, but it's interesting that the legislature saw fit to help in one place, but they haven't helped in this place. So you got your charge that you can make, actual cost of mailing or transmitting the record if you have some cost involved in that. And if you think it's going to be more than $25, you can get it up front. You can decide not to charge somebody even the nominal charges of the expenses you have if the purpose for which it was asked was not a commercial purpose, which most of the time it's not. Most of the time it's the press that's asking us for information, so it's in the public interest. But that's still in the discretion of the custodian as to whether or not the charge for any charges made for any of the copies. The breakdown of those charges is required. If it's in active use, you technically got 3 days to produce the records. Well, in practice, and this is interesting, after 40 years of practice, how a statute has just as a matter of evolution without any change in the wording of it, most people think a entity has 3 days to answer. Well, technically speaking, they don't unless the record's in use and unavailable. But it's just easier to say you've got 3 days. And it's a courtesy more than anything else. There's nothing in the statute that says that a requester has to say you got 3 days, or please get it to me in 3 days, or anything like that. Under certain circumstances, a person could walk into an office and ask for a record. They don't have to make a written request, they can just ask for it. Well, more often than not, that record's gonna be in use at that point. But what we deal with most of the time is the realities of it is, if we have a record, getting it together is one thing, but then reviewing it to see if it fits an exception is what takes some time, because typically that's going to involve a review by an attorney. And not everybody has an attorney on their staff, so you're outsourcing that and you're relying on your board's attorney to make some decisions and then communicate those to the requester.
So if it doesn't say 3 days, could they demand it right then?
Yes,
Do they walk in?
they could. Now, it gets a little bit silly if I'm standing across the counter saying, Mr. Forsythe, you've got to produce this, and you say, I don't have it right now. I mean, to what end does that accomplish? Most people recognize that it takes a little bit of time to pull this stuff together, and it takes some time to review it, especially if it's a sensitive record involving a student or involving even an employee. We have to figure out what we can do with that record before we can just say, well, here it is. Because you have an obligation under the law to protect the record as much as you have an obligation to disclose the record. So that's part of my job. I routinely deal with those kinds of requests. What are we going to do with this? What can we do with this? And that happens quite frequently. If possible, we can try to separate what's exempt and what's not exempt. Sometimes we can't. If we can redact the Social Security number and the date of birth on somebody's record, that's pretty easy to do. And we're supposed to do it so they can see that we've done that. I try to tell any requester why I've done that or when I've done that. So, generally speaking, we get along with everybody and we try to do what we can. We know what our job is, and we try to make sure we carry out our job as best we can. Do we make mistakes? Sure. It's an imperfect system, and there's some ambiguities in what we deal with as well. The Wrightsville case is a prime example of that. We felt that some of the records that were being requested were in fact protected under FERPA. We still believe that. The judge has sided with us in all but one particular record, and is reviewing some more records right now to decide if any of those records should have been produced. But we did what we did in good faith. We weren't trying to lay behind it or play hide and seek with it. We genuinely interpret it as best we can, and in the main, we get that right. The next important part of the FOI is the open meetings part, and I don't really need to dwell on this too much other than talk a little bit about what constitutes a meeting and executive session. It's interesting, our Supreme Court hasn't addressed this recently, but the most recent time it has addressed it, it spoke in terms of 3 members of a board being necessary to more than 3. That is, 3 could meet and not violate the FOI. I've advised my clients differently. That's an older case. That's a case that came down in it's the Eldorado Broadcasting case, and that's a 76 case. That's what I was trying to remember. The Attorney General says 2, the 2-member rule. Well, I think that's fraught with problems too. I discourage that. It's too easy for somebody to allege that you've met and talked about school business. So if there's going to be a question raised about that, my advice to my clients has been, let's be very cautious about that. Let's be cognizant of the appearance of a problem, even though there may not be a problem. Now, 2 board members happen to see each other at the coffee shop. They sit down and they're having coffee. That's okay. That's a social exchange. You don't need to be overheard talking about the next project that's going on with the school district. You don't need to be talking about school business, but you can talk about hunting, you can talk about fishing, you can talk about the election, you can talk about anything. Just don't talk about school business. And if there's more than one of you at a social occasion, and there could be, and especially in small communities, this is true, you wind up at the same events. Well, again, that's okay. But what you don't want to have happen is somebody to accuse you of having gotten together on a regular basis or on an isolated basis to say, we're conducting school business. Well, you don't need to do that. There's no reason not to bring your business right here in this boardroom. And if it needs a special meeting, ask the superintendent to call a special meeting. There's something of urgent nature that needs to be discussed. That's the best way to make that happen.
But even in this small town, if two of you, because, I mean, we can both show up at Cleveland at the same time or whatever, we don't have to run out the back door.
No, you don't have to run away from each other. You can be friends. You can be social friends. You can have each other over for dinner. That's okay. Just don't talk about school business and have the pure heart to be able to say that under oath. No, we never talked about school business. And so if you keep yourself keep that in mind as you go forward, as I'm sure you have in the past anyway. But I just want to give you that strong admonition. I don't necessarily think that the 76 case would hold up today. The Attorney General has commented many, many times since then, and the Attorney General thinks that 2 is enough. But I know of some 3-person boards. That wouldn't work. There were some commissions and whatnot who are also subject to the FOI, not school boards, but I represented a utility commission for a city, and they only had 3 members. Well, obviously, when any 2 of them got together, they had to be real careful about that, because that was a majority. They could make a decision, and the next meeting would just be a formality. You don't want that. You want your discussions to happen in public and happen at your regular meetings.
Was it always 3 members only, or?
That board stayed 3 members for a long time. Now it's bigger.
That's odd.
Yeah, it is odd. That's an unusual circumstance. But school boards are bigger than that in number.
So the 3-member rule doesn't have anything to do with the fact that 4 is quorum. That's just the number that 4 is.
Correct. In that particular case, it was a fact that 4 would have been a quorum. But I still don't think that was a determinative fact.
It's just 3 was the number.
3 was a number. In 76, the court thought that was okay. To have a meeting, if you're going to call it an emergency meeting, obviously 2 hours notice to the public, and the public includes those members of the Fourth Estate who have routinely asked to be apprised of your meetings. You need to give that notification. The Reitzel case involved the failure to notify the press on a couple of occasions that you were having a training, that you were having 2 different trainings, and expulsion hearings, which we argued to the judge, and I think we successfully argued to the judge that the matter was not going to be open to the press because the parent had the right to say it was not going to be open to the press. So it was a real form over substance kind of a thing to say we didn't notify of the actual hearing. They could not have attended the actual hearing anyway. The other folks in your district can meet. Audra can have all of her administrative team meet anytime. Now, if any 2 or 3 of you decide to go to those meetings, then it looks more like a board meeting and you've got a problem.
That's why she's never invited us.
Yeah, it's not a snub. She's just smart. So realize that. Now, there are occasions where the board will meet with an arbitrator or a mediator, and in those instances, that's not the board's meeting. That's the meeting of that particular official. And that meeting is not open to the press, and there's precedent to support that.
So when we go to Little Rock for a training session, Has the public been invited to that big thing at the hotel?
It's not your meeting, so it's okay. It's not your individualized training.
Okay.
This training involved this board.
Right.
But to attend continuing education is a mass event,
Okay.
not your meeting.
Okay.
It's okay.
Okay.
And yes, there's been precedent to support that.
Okay.
If you're going to have an executive session, what's critical to remember there is, as you did tonight, you announce the fact that you're going into executive session, and you announce the reason. Executive session is allowed for very limited purposes. It's to consider, this is the bottom of page 11, it's C1A. An executive session will be permitted only for the purpose of considering employment, appointment, promotion, demotion, disciplining, or resignation of any public officer or employee. Those are the stated reasons in the FOI. Under your student discipline and your teacher discipline and your classified discipline statutes, there's also provisions that are exceptions. And the FOI recognizes there are other statutory exceptions that may be created. You can have an executive session to deal with those matters, and you do quite frequently. And they have their own rules. They're kind of quirky. As an example, a teacher can have a private session, or the board can ask for it to be private. A classified person gets to say, one way or the other. The board doesn't have any say in that. Why those statutes are not the same, I have no idea, but that's the way it is. You want to announce the purpose, and then the persons that can be in that session. This is important to remember. I never get to go into an executive session under any circumstance that we're talking about under the FOI. That's not true under student discipline, teacher discipline, or classified personnel issues. Those matters, there's a little more leeway, and there's a tradition of allowing other people in those hearings because you're having a hearing. And if it's going to be an open hearing, we're going to protect students who testify in that hearing. It can be closed for that limited purpose if a parent of a student wants to close that hearing at the point of that person's testimony, that student's testimony, and then it's opened back up again if it's an open hearing. But I'm not invited to the executive session under the FOI, and you want to be careful not to invite anybody else who's not supposed to be there. And it's listed here who can attend. It's at the top of page 12. Person holding the top administrative position, that would be your superintendent. The immediate supervisor of the employee can be in attendance if necessary, and the employee can be in attendance. Notice that those are all may. So it's up to you. Do you want to invite those people? Any of those people? Any combination of those people? That's up to you. You may need one or more of them to have the facts laid out in front of you and discussed in detail. But you also can have an executive session that just involves your board. You can do that for interviews. That's the next part of this, 2B. Number 3 is something I like to emphasize. You don't call an executive session for the purpose of defeating the reason or the spirit of this particular law. It'll come back to bite you. There's just no reason to do that. So you got to be careful. You're supposed to stay on topic in your executive session. Now there's a court case, I'll tell you, where they made a recording of the executive session, which I don't recommend. Quite honestly, I think it's fraught with all kinds of problems. You don't have to record them, don't record them. But they had made a recording of theirs, and they talked about everything under the sun. But the court was generous enough to say, it still had something to do with this employment matter, and there was no violation of the FOI. I don't recommend that, even though the court said that was possible. Let's stick with what the statute says. Let's talk about what you're there to talk about. Come back out. You have to vote in public to make that an effective action. If you don't vote in public, it's a nullity. It has no effect whatsoever. So it's always critical that you come back, even after any of those disciplinary hearings that I'm talking about, you have to come back and vote publicly what happened. Now, in the case of a student, you don't reveal the name, but in case of a teacher or a classified employee, yeah, the name gets revealed. That's just the way it is. And that's what number 4 says. We can't do anything without coming back in public. Then we talk about recording. That was another thing in the Reitzel case. We didn't have a recording of the actual public part of those student discipline hearings. We had a recording, but we didn't keep it. So you have to keep it for a year. You can do a sound-only recording or a video recording. I think you video record yours, and that's fine. But you got to keep it for a year, and you got to be able to reproduce it in that format if asked. A person who's aggrieved by a particular action of a board, that is a failure to disclose records or a failure to conduct a meeting in accordance with the open meeting requirements, can seek relief from the court and possibly can get attorney's fees for doing so. That's what 2519-107 on page 14 talks about. 2519-101 is relatively new. It has a requirement that each state agency, board, or commission shall prepare and make available. Now, does that apply to you? Well, that's a good question. The Department of Education has some statutes and regulations that require you to put certain information on your website. And so I think you meet this requirement, generally speaking, with your meeting of the Education Department's requirements. I thought it was interesting to look at the most recent thing enacted. The very last page is where the General Assembly this last time said law enforcement personnel are spending too much time producing these videos and things, answering requests. This doesn't apply to you unless you had a law enforcement agency. It says school in C1 there, but then if you read all of those together, any of those named bodies modify the noun, the noun and adjectives, law enforcement agency. So it doesn't apply, but it's an interesting statute in that the legislature has taken the time to recognize that, yeah, it's a burden to address FOI request or records. In this case, they're talking about video. And so there's certain thresholds where if it's 3 hours or less, it's free, but after that, $20 an hour for each hour of personnel that's involved in that. I've known boards and public bodies that had to spend days producing records, and they couldn't do anything about it. In a small city, a clerk could spend days and just be derailed from doing whatever it is that clerk is otherwise supposed to be doing. There's no relief in the statute for that. There's really not. I've gone longer than I intended to. I was hoping to make it 30 minutes, but I'm happy to answer any questions y'all have.
Thank you, Charles. No, thank you, sir. I appreciate you coming over. You actually covered that very well, and I do appreciate it.
Well, I know that there are opportunities for training through the School Board Association. I encourage that you all, when you have those opportunities to engage in that, it's always good to have refreshers on this stuff and make sure it's uppermost in your mind what you can and can't do, but you're also welcome to call us. If there's a particular question in mind, we don't mind answering those questions and helping you puzzle through something. I assure you, the administrators that I work with have to do that on a fairly frequent basis, and it's just the lay of the land, and that's the way it is. So,
Absolutely.
I thank y'all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Yeah, by the way.